Hello, my name is Tom Godfrey, and I am the CEO of ITI Istanbul. And I'm going to talk today about facilitation skills. So, what are facilitation skills? Well, before we can answer this question effectively, we need to think about the background, the context to teaching and learning generally. So, what is teaching and what is learning? Here are two questions I want you to consider. Is teaching mainly about giving knowledge to learners, or is it about helping learners learn? And is learning primarily about knowing something, or is it about doing something? Now, probably you're going to answer that question saying, well, it depends. It's a bit of both. It's about knowledge and helping learners to learn, and learning is about knowing things and also doing things. But this is a distinction. It's an epistemological distinction. If you are a positivist, then you believe that knowledge is external, that there is an eternal truth, and that knowledge is something that can be transmitted from a knower to a knowee. Whereas if you're a constructivist, then you believe that knowledge is a construct. It's something that is internal, and that meaning is negotiated through interaction and a social interaction. And obviously this has an influence on how we teach. So, for example, a positivist would believe that rote learning is probably the most effective because it's a way of transmitting information from one person to another. Whereas a constructivist would say, no, learning is about inquiry, it's about problem solving, it's about interacting and negotiating meaning in a social context. So I'm going to present two models of EFL teachers. One is the teacher who believes that their role is a transmitter of information, and I call this the competence model. So these teachers produce lessons that are built on aims, materials, procedure, and it tends to be quite static. So that what is planned is what is taught. They believe that learning involves the reception of content. So going through the materials in the course is the primary concern. Lessons tend to be quite teacher-centered because the teacher is transmitting the information, and lessons are routine and scripted. Each time the course is taught, the lessons can be repeated again and again to each cohort. A second model is teachers who see their role as facilitators of discovery, and I call this the performance model. And basically these lessons are built on contexts, authentic contexts or imagined context, and they're often personalized. Learning involves the use of language. So the aim of the lesson is to get learner-generated language. Lessons tend to be quite learner-centered, a lot of time spent in pairs and groups with learners interacting with each other and using the language. And lessons are improvised and open-ended because the teacher is not sure how effectively the learners will complete the task. And each group of learners may complete the task in a different way. So if we believe in a more performance model of teaching, then this requires facilitation skills because we need to facilitate the interaction, we need to facilitate the learning. But what are facilitation skills? Essentially, they are skills that allow the facilitator to guide groups through processes of discussion, meetings, in order to achieve certain goals. So they are essentially skills that are used in any social interaction, whether it is workshops or meetings or team building or teaching, or even in the family with children around the dinner table. They are skills that encourage interaction and social interaction. If you put this into Google or AI and ask for these skills to be broken down, you will get a list similar to this. And essentially, they're all skills that are necessary in a classroom environment where we have interaction between people. I'm going to look today particularly at communication, thinking about what is communication, but also look at some techniques for facilitation and feedback. Probably the first thing we need to do as facilitators is create a positive learning environment, because without this, then learning and interaction will not happen. And a positive learning environment means an environment which is supportive, empowering, where participants feel valued, heard, and motivated to collaborate towards common objectives. In other words, where people feel that they are able to express themselves freely. One way we can do this is through icebreakers, warmers, activities that allow people to get to know each other. And typically, one icebreaker, for example, is in a group, find 3 things in common. And this is a task which will allow people to interact, talking about themselves, and it's a way of getting people to meet each other. Another example is a mingling activity. Mingling activities are where students stand up, walk around, try to talk to everyone, try to speak to everyone in the group, and maybe collect information. So, for example, like a find someone who survey kind of thing. And here is an example. One thing to notice is what are the stages, and also think about what are the advantages and disadvantages of this kind of activity. Obviously, giving instructions and setting it up so that the learners know what they have to do is the key to success.
I would like you to think of something that nobody here knows about you. For example, okay. I would like you to write it here. Write it secretly so that nobody can see. Okay? Okay, in a moment, thank you, I'm going to ask you to come here and take a card that is not yours. Okay? I also want you to take a card where you do not know the handwriting. Okay? So take a card from somebody you don't know. And then what will you need to do?
Guess who it is.
You guess who it is, and then to make sure, what do you do?
Ask them.
You ask them. For example, if you pick up a paper with this, what would you ask?
Did you want direct to film called 3?
Very good. Just make a question. Did you want direct to film called 3 in the morning? If I say no, what do you do next?
Ask them to ask someone else.
If I say yes, what do you do next?
Give them. No. Just win a point.
Be satisfied with your acquisition.
Are you satisfied? Is that all you want to know?
Oh, you could ask them how short was the film.
Real low. Is he on IMDb?
Who did you film it with?
Excellent.
When? Yeah.
Excellent. If they say yes, ask a couple of extra questions, get some more info. Okay, off you go.
Do you have a cello? Can you play the piano? What? Are you scared to either? No, you can play the piano.
Okay, can anybody tell me something interesting about Sarah?
She can play the piano.
Can you tell me something?
So there is a typical getting to know you activity, a mingling activity. And basically there are 3 stages. There's the setting up stage where the instructions need to be clear. And you notice that the facilitator was eliciting the instructions and providing examples at each stage. Then there is the task itself where the people stand up and mill around asking each other questions and interacting. And then there is the feedback stage where the facilitator asks for reporting back on what was discovered. So I think the advantages of these kind of activities is that it helps participants gain confidence, they feel relaxed, they start interacting, they start speaking in English. If it's a language classroom, but even if it's a training session or a meeting, it gets them going, it sort of activates them. It gives the facilitator or trainer an opportunity to diagnose the participants, see who they are, what do they know, what are their attitudes, if it's a classroom, their level of English. It also gets participants to get to know each other, as well as the trainer or facilitator. It's a process of beginning to build a rapport and beginning to encourage self-disclosure. It sets the atmosphere for the course. It kind of says, okay, this is the way we're going to interact. This is the way the learning is going to happen. And it's an energizer. It gets people active and participating. So we're going to look at activities of a similar nature. But the first question we need to think about is, what is communication? How do we communicate? And typically, any communication has a purpose. There is a communicative purpose. There is a reason why we speak. And very often that reason is transactional. In other words, we're speaking in order for something to happen or to get something. So typically there is an exchange of information. And in order for there to be an exchange of information, there needs to be an information gap. So A has some information that B needs or wants, and B will ask A for that information. So very often we need to create an information gap if we're using these activities in a classroom. So how do we create an information gap? And once we have created the information gap, then we can think about how we're going to communicate. What are the emotions? What are our attitudes? What do we believe? So I'm going to look at some activities where there is a created information gap. First activity is the hot seat, where we have one student with their back to the whiteboard, another student writes a word, the student in the hot seat cannot see the word, and they have to ask questions, or their colleagues will help them find the word. It could be a word, it could be a phrase, it could be a topic, it could be a series of words, whatever. But basically there is an information gap, there is a purpose in the communication. Similarly, a gallery reading, where there are texts on the walls and students have to go around reading the texts with a task to perform. Maybe it's answering questions, maybe it's scanning for specific information. Then they come back to their pairs or their group and they share the information in order to complete a task. Maybe it's the texts are related to holidays, holiday brochures, and they have to choose a holiday. Maybe it's buying a car and their car advertisements. Maybe it's buying a house, whatever the task may be. So we've created an information gap. We've created a reason for communication to happen. Similarly, it could be crossover groups, where we have a group of A's, a group of B's, a group of C's, and group A has some information, group B has some information, group C has some information, or they are discussing ideas, generating ideas on a topic, the advantages of living in a city or the country. Or group A, advantages of living in the city, group B, advantages of living in the country, and group C, advantages of going abroad or something. And then we regroup, we cross over the groups, so we end up with groups A, B, C, with a member from A, B, C, A, B, C, A, B, C, and now they share their information and report back. So we've got an information gap. Similarly, running dictation, where there are texts on the wall and students are in pairs. So A is, for example, the writer, and student B is the runner, and student B will run to the text and come back and tell A what to write, and then they together they reconstruct the text that's on the wall, or they answer questions, for example. With all of these activities, they're generating an information gap. They're generating a purpose to communicate. Obviously, the setting up and the instructions need to be considered carefully. Also, the space. I mean, particularly the running dictation, for example, you have to think about anticipate problems, because learners often will not do the activities they're supposed to do it. Sometimes they'll cheat. Often with running dictation, they would use their phones to take a photograph, or they'll take the text off the wall, or they will shout instead of running and dictating. So with experience, you get to learn how, anticipate the problems and students and setting up the activities effectively. Think, pair, share is a very common communicative activity where you give the learners a question or a task. For example, what are the advantages and disadvantages of getting learners to work in pairs? So they think about this individually, maybe make some notes, and then in pairs they share their ideas. What are the advantages and disadvantages of getting learners to work in pairs or groups? Well, there are basically two kinds of interaction possible in the classroom. There's an open classroom and a closed format. So an open classroom would be the teacher and the students, and the teacher talking to the students. In an open classroom, one person talks, everybody else listens. Alternatively, if you have closed pairs or closed groups, then in a closed pair, A is talking to B, but nobody else is listening. Everybody's doing their own conversation. Similarly with groups. So you're talking to your group members, but everybody else is not listening to you. And there are some factors involved in this. I mean, in an open class, the majority of the participants are passive. So one person is speaking, everybody else is passive, or hopefully they're listening, but we don't really know. In a closed pair, everybody is active. So you're having a conversation with your partner. So you're speaking and listening and responding. In an open group, there's high focus and high risk. So in other words, if I'm speaking, everybody is focused on me. Everybody's eyes are on me. So this is a high risk situation. If I make a mistake or I make a fool of myself, everybody will see it. Whereas in a closed pair, there's low focus. Only my partner is looking at me. Only my partner is listening to me. If I make a mistake, I'm not going to make a complete fool of myself. Or if I do, it's only my partner who's going to know that. In an open group, the interaction is dominated by the teacher primarily, and the strong participants. The weak participants, or the shy participants, or the less confident participants will not speak. They will be quiet. In a closed group, there's equal opportunities for participation for everyone. I can talk and my partner can talk. So what we need to think of are communicative activities that can be done in closed pairs or groups that can generate learner language and provide learner-centered learning and peer teaching very often. So a typical activity of this nature would be a role play, where students are given a role, often on a role card, and they're given preparation time, and then in pairs or groups they act out their role. Here is an example.
So the waiter says small, medium, large. Sugar. Thank you. Next. There's a menu over there for hot drinks. You go with your partner and write what you want. Okay?
That's $3.25, please.
There you are.
Thank you. Next, please.
Next, please.
Can I have a cappuccino, please?
Small, medium, or large?
Large.
Anything else?
Yes, I can have a medium Americano with sugar and no milk, please.
Okay, that's $3.25.
I come for Rod. Can I have a cappuccino, please? Small, medium, or large?
Small.
$3.
Here you go. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please.
Next, okay? Thank you.
Small,
Can I
medium, or
have a
large?
cappuccino?
So this is a role play in a restaurant where they're ordering drinks, and there's quite a lot. I mean, the preparation time is very important. So there's a lot of preparation, looking at the menus on the walls, looking at a dialogue, practicing the dialogue, demonstrating it with one or two pairs in open class before getting into the closed pairs practice. And the amount of preparation time is related to how effective the actual role play will be. The more time spent in preparation, the better the role play will be. Another example of a sort of activity that generates learner interaction is talking circles. And this is where the students are arranged in an inner circle and an outer circle. Or it can be done in two lines facing each other. And you talk to your partner about a particular topic, and then the teacher will say stop, change, and you move to your next partner. So you're interacting with a different partner, and you can talk about the same topic or the same story, or have different questions. This is a good way of generating energy, but also you kind of talk to a lot of people, so it helps build the rapport. Here is an example.
Who here said dusting? You said dusting burns a lot of time. It doesn't. It's just your hand.
Okay, which chore do you like and why? And which chore do you hate and why?
Remember who was A and who is B. Okay, all A's, come stand here. All B's,
When I say next, you go one step to the right, so you change the person in front of you. Okay, so for example, can you three come here? You three? Can you three come here? Huh? Okay, so you'll talk, and when I say next, what's gonna happen? Change. You're gonna come here. You guys are going to stay where you are. Okay, are you A or B?
A.
So A, you're going to stay where you are. You're going to change. So you come here. Do it. You'll come here. No. You'll go there. Okay. And then you're going to ask them the same questions. Okay? All of you are going to do this. Okay.
You like to
Okay, next. Okay.
I like cooking. I can't cook.
Okay, next. You stay. A, stay. You. Yes, come here. Come here. Just like that.
So you'll notice that with this setting up of this activity, there's a lot of gestures. And very often with these kind of activities, it's much better to show the learners what to do than to tell the learners what to do, because learners very often or typically follow the lesson with their eyes rather than their ears. Another activity that generates learner interaction, learner language, is some form of discussion. And if it can be personalized, it creates a natural information gap. So, I mean, we all have experiences that we want to share, and they are experiences that are unique to us, and nobody else necessarily knows about them. But if it's a discussion, it does need some kind of structure. And here is an example of a personalized discussion.
So, for example, an unusual experience you've had. And you talk about it for half a minute to the rest of the group. Or there'd be something like something which makes you happy, right? That's another one. Some squares have a free question. And if you land on that square, the other people in your team are allowed to ask you a question. Okay? Mm-hmm. So here's your game. Here's your counters. You've got a dice per team. Okay? So when you're ready, turn your game over and go.
I'll start. Okay. Who should we start? 3 questions.
One, Max. The English medium.
Something which makes me angry. That's a difficult one. I try not to be very angry. I think it's good not to get angry by too many things.
One of the issues with these kind of activities is how do you give feedback? I mean, if it's a task where there's one answer, so like a gap fill or a matching, then it's easy to sort of nominate students to give the answers, or students nominate each other, or they write the answers on the whiteboard, or you give them an answer key, and then they know what the answers are. But in a lot of these activities that are interactive, where learners are generating their own language, there isn't actually an answer. So we're relying on peer correction and peer feedback. And that is an opportunity for learners to support and help each other. Also, it's important, I think, to encourage reflection. So have an opportunity for them to reflect on what they did. What did you learn today? And sometimes the answer to that question can be quite revealing, because the teachers thinks that the aim of the lesson is something in specific, and then they get feedback from the learners and saying, what did you learn today? And sometimes it's something that they hadn't really anticipated, like a certain word or an expression or a topic. Another way of giving feedback, particularly if it's a one-word answer, is the board rush. So we can have answers jumbled on the board, or even questions jumbled on the board, and the learners have to, in 2 teams, it's a competition, learners have to run, so the teacher asks a question, learners have to run and circle or hit or identify the correct answer. And here is an example.
competition again between the pairs. Okay? We're going to read them first, so don't worry. And then I'm going to show you a picture that is related to one of the words. When you see the picture, you need to run. So you need to pick one of you to run. The other person needs to, so you have to tell him the answer.
Okay.
And you have to run to circle the right answer. If they get it before you, they win. You're the black team. You're the red team. Okay, so when you see the picture, you need to run and circle the right word, the right expression. Let's go with Ron. Okay, nice one. You ready? Oh, there's only one. Clap for yourself, you guys.
So obviously, yeah, that activity generates quite a lot of energy and competition. If you're interested in facilitation skills and developing facilitation skills and learning more about it, I do a facilitation skills masterclass workshop every summer. The next one will be in July, end of July, and we look at facilitation skills, but also at performative methodologies, so participatory methodologies, and looking at a lot also at drama and drama activities. So if you're interested, those are the workshop dates, put them in your diary. And here is a few clips from the workshop that we did last summer, and the participants talking about their reflections on it.
the necessary